Welcome everyone at our next How to DAO podcast. Today we are joined by Devansh Mehta from Ethereum Foundation, where he leads work at the intersection of AI, public goods, and governance. Devansh is the mind behind Deep Funding, an initiative that combines AI models and human judgment to direct resources to the open source project that power Ethereum. His work is about making sure that the invisible contribution to the ecosystem get rewarded. Today, we will be exploring how it can actually happen. And welcome, Devansh, because we are super interested to have you here and learn more. So, to start with, uh, what actually is deep funding? Is it like deep pocket funding or is it something else?
Yeah. So I think like one quick kind of correction. I am not the mind behind deep funding, although I wish I were. I'm more the hands of deep funding, whereas Vitalik is the original thinker behind the idea of deep funding. So I'm more like acting as the hands, but he's like the mind behind it. Um, and kind of if I have to describe deep funding, like why this is important, yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear now. I think it
Okay.
got lost a little bit.
Yeah, got. Yeah, so I'll just start from the top. Yeah, Bhutan internet, not the best, but can't help that. Um, I'll start with like why we got the name Deep Funding. Deep funding is like in it like the name is for two reasons. One is that we want the funding to be deep. It's not just whoever applies or uh, whoever gets to do good marketing or talk to the jurors. They are not the only ones eligible. You can fund across the entire dependency graph in a very deep way. And the second is of course like referring to deep learning models and how we can apply deep learning techniques to deciding on funding between projects. So this really started when after DevCon, I tweeted out my New Year's resolution saying that my New Year's resolution is to figure out how to give money through AI. And Vitalik then got in touch saying, "Hey, I've been thinking about this." And that led to correspondence back and forth for like about 5 days. And that's when we fleshed out the initial proof of concept for it. And then we just launched like 3 or 4 competitions after that. So after Vitalik saw the initial momentum that we managed to get behind deep funding, he said that why don't you just come over to the Ethereum Foundation and work on it in a proper and structured way. So that's a lesson to everyone who's listening to the podcast. Like if you get an opportunity to work on something interesting, don't like just go ahead and do it. Like don't wait for anyone's permission. Don't wait until you figure out how you're going to make ends meet or anything. Just show that you can deliver and that you're a person who can actually drive results, and then eventually other things will follow.
And post it on X so Vitalik can see it and maybe reach out. No, but this is cool, a super cool story, and like I've been part of the Gitcoin ecosystem, so funding open source is definitely um, at the core, like what I believe in, and like this new way of like we don't have just humans, but actually AI supporting what to fund. It's very interesting because now like AI it's kind of everywhere, and if he can make it better and like more accurate the funding paths, we will have more impact and build Ethereum more sufficiently. So let's get into how that actually works. So you said like you wanted to fund through AI. So how do AI is actually helping make the decisions?
Yeah.
I
You can
think you
hear
are
me,
back
right?
now.
Yes,
Yes,
I'm
now I
back
can
now.
hear.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do
Great.
AI works?
Yes. So I think like why AI is the question to ask, or even like why models in general. Like we've actually seen in these deep funding competitions that AI is not performing as well as metrics based models. So it's like similar to chess, right? Where before 2016, uh, like deterministic models would beat AI, and then in 2016, AI won against the Kaspersky model. So I think that's where we are with even like funding decisions. Like where like models built in the regular way are actually outperforming AI. But we are probably gonna like overcome that in a few years or even a few months, looking at the rate of progress. But why models in general? So moving away from AI, but like AI is one type of model you can build. Um, but
We can
why
hear you fine.
use but why use models in general? And I think that relates to an idea about indirection, which Vitalik is keen to see more of in public good space. So if I have to explain indirection easily, it's that even if I'm a US senator, I can't directly help Elon Musk. At the most, I have to appoint a friendly FCC commissioner, and that commissioner then gives Elon a license or a grant or something like that. Um, so that's kind of the broad idea which we want, where we don't want jurors' votes to directly equal to money to a project. We want there to be some indirection. So that's kind of the broad idea, where as like my vote goes into selecting which model is most aligned with me, and that model then gets to distribute money. So it creates this nice feature of indirection on the one hand. And the second thing, before I kind of wrap up this point, is that AI is very and models are good at giving a lot of answers, but we don't know if they're always aligned with what we want. Humans are good at making decisions, but we can only make a few of them. We can't make too many decisions. So how do we actually relate both of these, where humans make a few decisions, those few decisions select the model, and then the model makes a lot of decisions based on the few. So that's kind of the
Hmm.
core insight that we're trying to work on.
No, this is cool. And like as I was going through your work, like basically, if I understand what you are saying, it's like now we have the juries which are making the decision on like which repo gives more value or is more valuable compared to other. So like they select like 30 repos or something, 30 pairs, which one is better, and then the AI based on that input basically do the final distribution and actually kind of distribute the funding. Is that correct?
Yep. So jurors
Cool.
are given very local questions to answer, like, is Solidity more valuable and responsible for Ethereum success, or is a Viper more responsible? And they can say Solidity is more responsible. And then we ask them how much more responsible are they? Like, give a multiplier on that. So
Mm.
it's like a very local question that jurors have to answer, which is just how much more valuable is one open source repo compared to another. They don't need to answer global questions like how valuable is this for the world or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a very local question, and we use that to get the global graph.
But it's super important in the this like the solution itself, because without that input, AI, as you said at the beginning, is not actually giving such a good result. So we literally need a human in the loops, correct?
Yeah, I think I refer to it more generally as ground truth data that like. Otherwise, you're like the Wild West cowboy. Let's build an AI, let it distribute money. That was my naive thinking, by the way, which is I'm going to make this amazing AI agent and it's going to figure out how to distribute money to projects. And then Vitalik was the one who corrected me on that. He said that we don't want to live in a world where we are at the mercy of some omnipresent AI, which we are hoping for its grace and benevolence. But we want that to be a competitive market where if your AI is better than mine, your AI gets to give the money.
Hmm.
So that's where the presence of ground truth data comes in. So in deep funding, the ground truth data has been extremely operational heavy. It's what I spend a lot of my time on, which is like reaching out to high context Ethereum developers and asking them to give ratings between these repos. And then we can use that to train models, and we can use it to also rank the models and select the winning model. Um, so that's kind of one side of ground truth data, but it doesn't have to be humans. Like another example of ground truth data, which was one of my favorite competitions that we've held, was to predict the results of the Gitcoin grants 23 round even before the round got over. So we have a list of all the projects. You have to now build a model which predicts how much money each project is going to get in the Gitcoin round. And then once the round begins, we stop the competition, we let it go, we let the Gitcoin round continue. And once we get the results, we can actually say, hey, this AI model or this model was actually the best at predicting the quadratic funding round. And that actually leads to some nice things, like we don't need to hold a quadratic round in the future. We can just ask a model saying, if this project took part in a round, how much money would it have got if it had taken part? And boom, you
Yeah.
can get an answer directly from the AI for that.
But is that actually something like that the model will be accurate every single time, or is it something more like a lottery? Like one time I had all the numbers and I won, but like those same numbers won't work every single time.
Yep. And I think that's also where we are running into things like Goodhart's law, where if people know that this is how the model was configured, they'll find ways to hack the model. Which is why the model has to always be evolving. Like your model was number one on the leaderboard now, so it can be used for like projects before that date. But in the next competition, maybe another model wins, and now we can use
Yeah.
that. So you can never really predict which model is going to win. So it's a neat way of bypassing Goodhart's law. And in terms of what you were saying about the error rate and lottery, so if I remember the results right from the competition, like there's an error rate, which is how close was your model's predictions to the actual results.
Mm-hmm.
And if your model just randomly guessed, you would have got an error rate of something like 0.04. And the winning model in our competition got an error rate of 0.017.
Okay.
So we actually did like much better than randomly guessing, like not perfect, but like the I think the larger point is that we can actually measure the error of a model. If you have a very low error rate, then you're more confident in it, but if it's like a high error rate, then you probably don't want to use it too much. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
even if
No,
it's
no,
the
that
number
makes
one
sense.
winner. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense because like yeah, exactly. If you just like guessing, that's like not really long term sustainable. But like going to the kind of like deeper into the topic of deep funding, it's like the next thing you realized is that funding on project level, like on the brand level, it's really hard to determine because there is like various type of impacts, but it's way better to actually fund it on the repo level because you directly see how the repo was used, forked, and what impact it created. So yeah, is there anything like more you would like to kind of share about kind of this decision, like being on a repo level versus the project level?
Yeah. Yes, I think I saw this play out in the Octant Epoch 8 round. I love the Octant people, and I've learned so much just by following their experiment right from the start. So what I saw was that in Epoch 8, a project like Grow the Pie received the exact same funding as Protocol Guild. Although, like Protocol Guild is a collection of all consensus and execution clients of Ethereum, while Grow the Pie is a dashboard tracking usage of different dApps and smart contracts across all L2s and Ethereum. So, kind of one metric which I've heard for how good your funding mechanism is that Protocol Guild should be orders of magnitude more than other projects because they are a collection of all the repos. They represent many projects. But what
Mm-hmm.
we actually saw ended up happening was because Protocol Guild has unionized all the repos and they're a collection of all the repos, they actually got penalized for it. Whereas if each repo had applied individually, they would have received far more money than if they had banded together under the banner of Protocol Guild. So that was also a
Yeah.
major inspiration behind, and just like data, which shows why we actually need to look at the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So the proof of the value you've delivered is in the open source repo, and it's also easier for models. If I ask a model how valuable is a project like Grow the Pie, it's going to give like not a great answer. But if I give it a specific open source repo, like it's way more tractable and all the information is contained within that repo itself. So those were some of the thinking behind it.
Yeah, and that makes so sense. Like, it's hard to like even if you would calculate protocol guild like value, you would probably need to go like deeper and like actually basically say like this repo plus this repo plus this repo plus this project. Like you cannot really just like from high level say, okay, this is like this type of thing, but you need to calculate like each individual thing. So yeah, and like we love Octant too, or I love Octant too. Like I've been voting in Octant. I don't know if since Epoch 3, I believe. So I actually, got some of the tokens, so I can really give to the project. And like you're right, it's like hard to determine which project it's more valuable, or also like, how like usually just like trying to be fair, which is not every single time the best thing. That's why the funding is a little more flat than like different. So like totally share your learning there. And now like, okay, so you basically like got the deep funding, got the humans and AI working together, so you get great results. You are on repo level because it's way easier to determine like uh, who should get funding and how much, because there is the clear impact visible. Well, and now we are getting even like lower, like there are multiple contributors to each repo. So how you actually define who should be paid from that kind of pool of money because they contributed more or less to the repo? Like, is there some technique to that?
Yeah, I think that's the hard problem we'll have to tackle once the pilot ends in the next 2 3 months, which is like if we've given a repo $10,000, how does that repo now come to a consensus on who should get that money or how it should be spent? Should it be spent to hire a new person to work on it? Should it be used to compensate the maintainers on a retro funding basis? So I think that's some of the thornier questions that we'll be entering into. And like coming into the next year. And I think it's also an exciting direction for all the people interested in governance, that how can we actually do governance at the repo level, not at the project level and not at like a big DAO and like token voting or any of that. But there is an open source repo which people are contributing to. It has got some resources. So now how do they do two things? One is decide how to spend that money, and second, decide whether to approve a change to the repo or not. Because we are seeing a lot of security issues happening in open source repos with like Chinese infiltrators and North Korean infiltrators into repos, and like maintainers' life has just become hell, where they have to try screening out for all of that. So I think that's broadly what governance boils down to in our space. How do you spend money, which is a zero sum game? If I give you money, I can't give it to someone else. And should we approve this change, which is a binary thing, like either you approve it or you don't. So it's also zero sum in that aspect.
So this is interesting. It's kind of like it's like a DAO, like in a sense, like you have like a small like sub DAO, like the repo level. So how you give people the voting power? Like what is actually determining how much voting power you should have? Like one person, one vote. Not sure. Some people just contribute way more than others, and if you just like I join the repo and you get a vote, I don't think it's like the best model. But also like the number of commits or lines of codes, that's also not great because like better code can be way less lines of like lines, and like you're actually a good developer if you can like make it happen that way. So like there are so many variables. Like, have you been already thinking like how you would approach this kind of problem?
Um, so I think like there are some useful experiments we can see in like community notes, which has started off the idea of plurality. That if people vote similarly, we treat them as one account. Whereas if people vote in a different way and then they happen to agree on something, like we give it a higher weight. So it's like a lot of the problems of Sybil analysis of Sybil problems. They try to identify that you are a unique human meat bag, but they don't try to identify the problem of humans acting as bots. So if I go to a village and I tell people, hey, I'll give you $10, just come and scan your eyeball, like everyone is going to take me up on that in the village. So that's an example of humans acting like bots. So that's kind of the much thornier problem to deal with, which is what this plurality research is going around. But yeah, it's like I don't know, like you're the expert, Pankar, on like now governance. Like how would you approach like the repo level governance?
Well, it's a definitely interesting design space, and like as I said, like you basically cannot like do it just like one person, one vote, or one commit, because there is like a combination of things. And I think what you were describing and with the humans and AI in the loop, I think that's kind of where I would head to, even on that level, because like you know what developer contributed more value to the repo and who contribute less, because it's also not just a code, but there might be, you know, guidance to other developers provided, you know, he's sharing the vision of the code and like getting more people involved. That's like also super valuable. And I feel like usually people know about each other in a sense. So like how I would approach it, and tell me what you think about it, it's like more on the social level. So like you actually, like, I know, hey Devansh, like you did great job on this report, like really, like, you know, value your contribution. And this like zero x abc, I know he's coming here and there, so it's probably a person. You know, I had one DM with him, but like the value was like 5% of that. So like, you know, still, you know, have some involvement on that. And I think the people should basically decide how it gets, how it's the governance works.
Yeah. I guess the main issue with that is that the people who are most qualified to make that judgment are the least willing to be a judge because they don't want to burn bridges. And it's like the same problem with like democracy, that the best ruler is someone who doesn't want to rule. So I think that's a similar dynamic here where like the maintainers have more than enough on their plate and they actually don't want to be making judgments that, hey, Pankaj, you are worth $30. Hey, Devans, you're worth $50. Like they don't want to be doing that. And it actually breaks apart the entire repo contributor base if you do it incorrectly, and it sets in politics. So I think that's where the idea of indirection matters so much, and what you were saying about bringing AI in, that the maintainer is making judgments, but it's ultimately the AI that's making the allocations. So even the maintainer has plausible deniability that, hey, I just had to answer comparisons. It's the AI that did the final allocations, and based on my ground truth data, which selected it. So I think that's definitely like doing a level 4 at the contributor level. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like as you're saying, like it should be that way. Like I give my input, so also I, like the maintainers and the developers, they don't want to spend tons of time like doing this. And like now I'm blinking on the name of the project, but there used to be like this gift tokens on uh was it Sobel? No. What was the project? Well, you basically in Bankless DAO we done it a lot. Like you basically had tokens which you distribute to your colleagues, and based on the final distribution, you got some money paid out. But it was like super like labor intensive, and eventually it kind of died out. You need to make it also like very friendly in a sense. Like I just want to answer these 10 questions every month, and then AI deal with it, kind of thing. So I agree with you. The indirection and making sure that like you don't overwhelm the people, it's super useful. So I think we have now like top of the funnel, like the deep funding as a concept. We know that we need the human jurors as an input to the AI to distribute as an indirection. We know it should be on the repo level, because it's way easier to that. And then when we get to the people, we basically like replicate the concept we have done, how we decided on the repo funding,
Yeah.
replicate to the humans. My
Yeah.
question here
I
is
mean,
like,
I'll quickly add one change to the last part, which is I worked in nonprofits before entering blockchain, and I saw a lot of these international aid agencies come with bazookas and give a lot of money, and that destroyed all the local NGOs because they couldn't compete with that. But then after 3 years, the international NGO would go away, and then the local NGOs are like finding it much harder to work because of the bazooka that they did. So that's why at the repo level, I'm actually very sensitive towards making sure that every repo can use its own technique. So, like some of the repos, like for example, the Argot Collective, which is Solidity, HEVM, Fee, some of the other languages, they have decided that any money any repo gets has to be given to a smart contract that distributes it to all its members. So that was actually a condition of them joining the Dev Tooling Guild. So I wouldn't want to go in with my bazooka there and be like, hey, we have this deep funding thing, you have to use it to distribute. If they already have their system, I'm more than happy to use that system. So I think giving that space of plurality, that hey, if you want to figure out how to contribute your contributors, one way is deep funding, but if you have another system in place, like we do not want to interfere it with it, and you can use that.
Yeah, no, and this is a great addition. Like how much, like let's say Ethereum Foundation in this sense, like should be involved and how far, Like you probably want to be involved in that, like if you're just distributing your money, just like on the level where it goes. But then if you go lower, it's more probably like as you're saying, it's more like a recommendation. Hey, you can use this and it kind of worked for others, so you should try it out. But we are totally comfortable you doing it this way. The question here is, would there be something you would be like, oh, if you're doing it this way, we disqualify you?
Yeah, I think we've not run into that yet because that's a problem which we are going to encounter next year. But I guess if the maintainer said, yeah, this is all my money, and we've actually seen some cases of that happen with Optimism's retro funding, where some of the projects did not distribute the money to their maintain, like to the contributors, and some of it was literally just sitting there idle, like not used, not touched. So that's kind of the outcome that we would want to avoid, that the money is not even used, it's just sitting there idle, because they can't come to a consensus. So that's obviously like one bad case. And the second bad case is the maintainer just claims all of it for themselves, and they don't try to set up any legitimate process, and it's just like a plutocracy. So that's the second outcome that we wouldn't want. Yeah.
Well, the idle part, I think like with optimism, there was some lockup period, and like it's kind of interesting because like you have retroactive funding, so it's already the work was done, but then you are kind of imposing lockup, so you cannot use the money. So what do you think in terms of lockup, vesting, and other like methods? Is it helpful for creating this impact, or is it more like harmful because you want this money to actually be used, not just sit idle?
Yeah. So I think it's again a case by case basis. Like in Optimism's case, I think the lockup did make sense because there would have been too much sell pressure, where the moment they got it, they would like sell it. Whereas when you stagger it, like 1 year later, it's not like all teams are going to immediately try selling after 1 year. Some would have forgotten, some would have done it 2 or 3 days, or even a week or month later. So I think like the lockup period makes sense in like a volatile token like OP. But if you're giving USDT or USDC or any stable coin, like it makes less sense to do a lockup period. Um, so that would be just my initial thoughts. It depends on the case by case over here.
So I challenge you there, like because like the lockup period makes sense for the OP itself, but you want to fund the projects to actually work. Like does that lockup make actually sense for the project? Because that's so we had some issues with this, like some project I was helping with, like they need the money now, they need to pay rents, like they like want to really work on this, but without money they just cannot, and they get the grant and they're like, oh, I cannot use it for a year, so I'm going to find a job for a year and then come back. So like I think like there might be some challenges like that might be extreme, but like I think this is more beneficial for the protocol rather than the project itself, correct?
Yeah, right. And I think like also I've heard cases of like projects where they got like a lot of money in retro funding, like a million, million and a half, and then Optimism asks them, "Hey, is it okay if you can integrate this chain, this new chain?" And then they'll be like, "Yep, that'll be $40,000, please." And Optimism would be like, "We just gave you a million and a half," and they're like, "Oh, that's retro funding; it doesn't count." So I think there is this thing of um, like you're not getting the full bang for your buck when you do a purely retro based approach. So that is kind of another tangential challenge that we've seen with some of the projects and with this method of funding in general.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, it's always interesting, like if you allocate fund and how people would kind of behave. There can be other extreme. You give someone like couple $100, and then you are expecting do everything for you. So that would be the extreme on the other side. I feel like we both want like more impact to be created and more like sustainable ecosystem. But how to do it, like it's not easy. So we are running out of time, but basically, last question here is like, is there something you would like to mention to our listeners before we wrap up? Maybe around the deep funding or something new, like you just start working on, and people should maybe take note of.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll say two things over there. One is that if any of you are like an expert model builder, or even you just have experience with how valuable open source repos are to Ethereum, we have a competition going on right now on Pond until October 5th, where you can submit a CSV file indicating the relative value between 45 open source repos. These are things like consensus clients, execution clients, dev tooling clients. So you can give like a relative value and upload it. And if you land up in a good position on the leaderboard, you get prizes from Vitalik and EF. So I highly encourage you to take part in that competition. And the second thing is that we are looking at a new structure of doing deep funding itself. So whereas the earlier structure was like a Kaggle competition where you have ground truth data, you submit and we measure your error rate. What we are getting interested in now is a prediction market based approach where we ask people that if a juror evaluated this repo, what score would the juror give it? So we don't actually need to evaluate every single repo, but we can still get an answer to every single repo based on the value it's trading at. And if there's high volatility or someone buys an evaluation for that repo, then the market actually resolves and people win or lose money based on that. So that's something which we're launching with Seer, which will also be coming up in like a few days. But I think that there are many different implementations that we can do of deep funding. So either take part in the contest yourself, help design new ways of doing distilled human judgment, like we've done with Seer and Pond now. And the third would be just to become a juror yourself. Like if you are an expert, we always need people who can provide ground truth data. So like just get in touch on Telegram, on Twitter, or anything, and I can help guide you.
Well, that's awesome, Devansh. Thank you very much for that. And using markets also as a decision making. It's cool, and future arcades definitely a concept to explore there as well. And we had a podcast with Butter team a couple months ago, it would be, but I know that they are also progressing on it. But this was a great conversation. I learned ton about how AI works, how the deep funding gets going, and like how we can make Ethereum better. So thank you very much for coming, and enjoy your day.
Yep, thanks. I learned a lot as well, and thanks for